I don't think Mr. Howe can talk though.
Uh,
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. It's Marshall, your host. Let's see here. I'll pop myself on video real quick just to say hello. Hello, I'm down here in the corner. I am live in the International Kriegsspiel Society's. I just realized I have my camera all messed up. I have it off. I was cleaning today, and I moved my camera to clean. Anyway, now we're square. I was we are in the Discord for the International Kriegsspiel Society. We have a little stage going. I'm here with James Horton, who is a Master Umpire Candidate. We also have Ed Portals here, and we have Hotron. Hotron? How's that supposed to be pronounced?
Yeah, Hotron. It's a
Hotron.
variation of our last name.
Right. Yeah. I was like, man, that family resemblance sure is obvious.
Yep.
Well, that's fantastic. Um, so James has put together and run quite successfully a number of games with our community prior to coming to the International Kriegspiel Society. James was running games kind of out there on his own. Reached out to us, and I would hope that some of what he has learned from us has helped him kind of helped his craft, if you will. From everything that I have seen, it's worked beautifully. He's doing an amazing job. You got a couple games in the works already. You're running one game at least that I am currently involved in. Again, you're doing brilliant on all fronts by all accounts. So, we wanted to come on today, though, specifically to talk about this beautiful American Revolution game that you ran. So I think the best way to do it, James, is maybe kind of get your story, a little bit about the inspiration behind the game, the general problem or idea, as we would call it in Kriegspiel, which is
mhm.
basically what were the main problems that both sides had to contend with, and then kind of go into how it played out. And then once we kind of have your overview of the situation and how it played out, or even in the middle of that, we'll call upon Portal and Hotron to speak up and kind of offer insights and maybe kind of give their take on everything. And at the end of this, the audience should have a really cool overview of how this campaign unfolded. So, James, go ahead and tell us. Just go ahead and start and tell us what inspired you to do this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marshall. Thanks for having me. Um, I'm a huge fan of the American Revolution, and in the last few years, just got really involved, read a lot of books about it, watched a lot of YouTube videos. Prior to discovering the International Kriegspiel Society, I had, as you mentioned, kind of created my own version of Kriegspiel and played it with my friends. And during that time, I came across this map, and I'm a big sucker for maps, and I love a good map. And this one's to me just beautiful. It's a little bit stylized. It's not entirely accurate, but it's large and giant. It's high definition, and I sometimes in the Kriegspiel battles they're very small and narrow focused. I kind of love the larger, more sweeping ones. And so when I saw this map, I fell in love with it, and it couldn't get out of my head. And so eventually, I'm like, I'm just gonna run a game on it. Um, and so as you can see, this is New York, Manhattan, and the area around it. And basically, I wanted to do a semi-historical reenactment of the New York campaign, where the British, after getting kicked out of Boston and leaving, came back to the U.S. before the U.S. came back to the colonies and started their campaign to retake them. And so Washington had the very difficult task of how do you defend a bunch of islands and peninsulas when you have no naval power against the greatest naval power in the world, and being greatly outnumbered. Um, Now, I did say it's semi-historical because I didn't build the orders of battle exactly historical on both sides. I gave Washington a leg up because I wanted it to be closer to an even fight. And so I gave him more units than he had historically, and the units that he had were higher quality. But he still had a very difficult time because this is a huge map. It's a lot of area to cover. And it's basically impossible to cover it all and prevent the British from landing where they wanted to. And then, the British had the run of the sea, basically. The Americans had a few strategically placed forts that could stop them for a while. But ultimately, it was a hard fight for them. So the challenge that Washington had and the Americans had was, how do you defend this island? And so they had their main priority was actually keeping their army intact. So their main priority wasn't to maintain Manhattan, because if the armies lost, the war was lost. So first priority is keeping the army intact. Second priority was, if I remember right, defending, and maybe Portal can help me out, defending Manhattan if possible. For the British, the main priority was taking the island Manhattan to establish a base, and also, if they could, as a second priority, defeat or capture as much as they could of the American colonists. I'm pausing if there's any questions at this point.
No, I mean, that sounds like a pretty cool basic problem. And I think what we would do is ask Washington what his strategy was. I mean, yeah, that's the problem. How did you approach that problem?
Yeah, so this was something that was really tough planning for, and we talked a lot. I felt very lucky that a lot of the generals on my team were very experienced and thought pretty deeply about it. Our basic idea was, at the start, was that, our main priority is to keep our army intact. So we had to keep as many, or at least one route of escape open. And as long as one route of escape was open, we were fine. We didn't really have that much to worry about. If we lost Manhattan, that happened, but we knew we wouldn't be destroyed. Luckily, there's so many ways you can escape here. So originally we spread our forces out pretty thin. I think we had 3 commanders on Long Island, 1 in Newark, 2 in New Rochelle, Mammorack Bay. And the plan is on first contact, we were going to draw back, retreat to our main force in Manhattan, and then hopefully, knock on wood, the plan was to really hit one side of the British really hard. Because if they're trying to encircle us from 3 different ways, if even one of those fails, we knew we would make it out okay. So that was our main strategy. But it was really tough planning for, because this map is so big, and it took days sometimes for letters to go across, which made some communication really hard.
All right. For the British, what was your approach to this? I mean, this looks like a big mess. You've got this, network of islands and channels and towns and cities and roads, and you probably didn't know where the Americans were, I'm guessing.
From the initial scouting reports, we knew rough locations where the enemy was, and more specifically where they had some forts positioned with our cannons to shoot down our boats if we got in range. And so, for example, we knew there were forts covering these areas, and we knew about some other forts, I think over here. Actually, that one might have been new. But basically, when we were drawing up plans on the voyage over, we had in mind a couple places that we could land, but then when we got here and realized that they had built some more forts since last we saw the area, we realized we only had one choice that we could land unopposed, and that was down here at Amboy. We had considered landing at New Rochelle or Mamaroneck, but we knew that those were contested and they would be defending those areas, and we'd be fighting for every inch. And so the thinking was we'd land here at Amboy and then make our way around. Of course, things changed very quickly once we actually landed at Amboy and whatnot. But that was our thinking.
That's a good, and something I forgot to mention, that one of the challenges that the British had is their units didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, and historically it came over a period of weeks or months even. I streamlined it a little bit. It came in 3 different waves over a period of days, but still they couldn't. If they landed one force somewhere where the Americans could get to them, they threatened being outnumbered before the rest of the waves arrived. So that was a major consideration about where to land to begin with. Of course, the British originally landed in Staten Island because it's easy to defend that island, but Garrett opted to land in Amboy.
And how did that pay off?
It worked out okay. I was surprised to see that there were some Americans defending the port there, but it didn't take much to push them back. And then, then we were able to land unopposed after that and maneuver all the way to where do we get Newark without hardly fighting anyone. So it worked well. Yeah, it worked well.
So Portals, how do you explain that you allowed the British to go all the way from Amboy to Newark before opposing them? What's going on there?
Well,
So we
he did oppose me here, and he burned the
Ah.
ferries, and then I had my men go around like this, actually.
Oh boy. Oh my.
Yes.
Okay.
commander, Mercer, he had orders to retreat to Manhattan as soon as serious contact was made. The idea being, okay, we have one wing of the British Army on the west side of the Hudson. And
I think the pieces moved when I moused over them.
Yeah, your pencil has mass, apparently.
Unbelievable. Go ahead.
So the idea was if they're on the west side of the Hudson, they can't do anything to us to most of our forces on the east side of the Hudson. So it was Mercer had orders not to engage heavily unless he was like sure he was going to win, because we wanted him with the rest of our forces. We didn't want to fight a fight that we knew we couldn't win, which I think that was roughly.
That's what
yeah.
was coming your way. And I was really bummed you escaped because I knew we were going to slaughter whatever was there.
Yeah.
Did you think about cutting him off before pushing him there? Like maybe sending a force here to take this crossing from behind?
I didn't cross my mind that he would abandon the fort so readily.
Oh, wow.
So no, it didn't, and I didn't, yeah, no, it didn't cross my mind.
Yeah, he made some pretense at staying at Railway, and so they originally moving westward
Yes.
to get in behind him, and they thought they were going to come in, take Newark, and then get behind him at Railway. But he pretty quickly, on his own, he's like, I'm getting out of here. Then he got the orders from Washington, hey, get out of there. So he ran basically at that point, and it was close. The British almost cut him off, but he made it and got to safety on the east side.
I had left all of the artillery here on this side of the river to shoot the guys in Railway, and so make them think, hey, we're going to cross here, when in reality we were marching the long way around.
But too
bad it didn't work out.
That's a brilliant plan. That's really smart, and that makes me feel a lot better. That's right up there with doing this thing. Only you did it on a much larger scale, and it just didn't pay off because luck and timing being what they are.
Right.
But I think that's definitely a point for you for at least attempting something so clever as that. And
Well, thank you.
Gosh darn it, those rebels and traitors got away, didn't they?
You mean those cowards?
Right? Was there any interaction between the two sides? Was there any what I like to call smack talk between the two? Did you send each other mean letters or threaten each other?
There were. Later.
I didn't get any until I was with the Hessians over at New Rochelle.
Yeah, there was a lot of animosity later in the battle.
They were at one point, and we'll get to it, I guess, later, but they were captured generals and negotiations for information and things like that at the end. So yeah, there were letters sent back and forth, and it was pretty fun.
Nice. All right, so the British get up here to Newark. They take all of this. And for the Americans, you folks are consolidating where, at Manhattan?
Yep.
What's your plan to defend Manhattan?
The idea is they can't really, and this was later proven false, but they can't really easily cross here. We had a fort here, I think, they couldn't sail their ships up, and so that we wouldn't need to worry about this side here. And we were anticipating them landing at New Rochelle or Mamarock Bay. We thought, okay, they know they can't come in through the west. They're going to try and hit us through the east. We're going to move everything there and just try and hit them as hard as we can when they're coming through.
And for the British, how did you get across the Hudson?
So that's an excellent question for General Cornwallis. I was with the Hessians at the time, but my orders were for him to find an opportune moment in night or under the cover of fog and darkness to get the longboats up there and make the crossing. I think it was something like that. And they had their fort right here, and so make the crossing and take out that fort real quick so we could get our boats all the way up here and have naval support. And so that's what I told him to do, and I don't remember. He did something like that eventually.
Maybe I'll explain. So kind of the British original plan was get there with the first wave, get there, scout it out, establish a base, and then based on where they're seeing the fences, make a plan. And so by the time they saw that Mercer had run away from Newark and they basically had the run of New Jersey, General Howe and his generals formed a plan to basically a three-prong attack. So wave 3, which was the Hessians, would land here at New Rochelle. Clinton would arrive here at Jamaica Bay and make the move across into Brooklyn, and then Cornwallis would remain here and wait for an opening to basically cross the bay and attack Manhattan. Go ahead.
I should add, actually the orders were for Clinton to come here and take out the 2 forts.
Oh, that's right.
That they had built, because there were 2 forts on either side of the river, and I mistakenly thought that we needed to take them out on both sides of the river to move ships up here. And so I thought we need to take out both of these forts on both sides. That's why the Clinton's force and the Hessians were necessary, so that we could get Navy support all up in here. Because we have the strong Navy, let's utilize them, was my thought.
And I don't know how much this played. We did to try and do a little deception. I don't know how much it worked, but we built, I think, fake cannons.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that the only fort with fake cannons, or?
Yeah, we didn't, or I think we had like one real and then a bunch of fake,
Oh.
and we moved the real one up to New Rochelle later.
Yeah, I kept finding out you guys were taking your cannons out of your forts. I'm like, what are they doing? Like, now I can just move my ships in.
So it's always fun to see it from an umpire perspective, but one of the things that was humorous is, so this fort, the Americans were building a new fort at Greenwich Bay, right here to defend this crossing, because once this fort was taken, the British could sail their ships up along this coast unhindered. It didn't quite have the range here from this artillery battery, and so they saw that they're building a second fort, kind of last minute, and it was still under construction. And I can't remember who it was, but I think it was Mahood's scouts actually spotted that the fort wasn't quite completed and reported that to him. And then he reported that to Cornwallis, and Cornwallis reported it to Howe. But by the time it got to Howe, the fact that the fort wasn't completed was omitted. And so the British actually could have sailed their fleet up here pretty early on and landed, and it would have been a completely different game if they had, but that scout report kind of got lost in the
Oh, it was a game of telephone.
Telephone.
Oh,
So that's
my
kind of funny
goodness.
for me to see.
So I can blame Cornwallis for that? Or
Either
Mahood.
either Mahood or Cornwallis, if you want to blame him. But it was funny. As an umpire, I'm like, big opening, because it was like a day away from being completed, but it wasn't
would've been
quite, so they
great.
could have gone by.
I would have loved that.
Yeah.
But it still sounds like the British are enjoying something of a cakewalk. They're not being seriously opposed. The Americans are backing up at every opportunity.
Yeah, not
is
yet.
that the correct read?
Yeah.
So far.
Up
Yeah.
until this point. So before we get to the big action, so Clinton landed at Long Island, and by that point, Spencer and Heath were there. They saw it, and they reported it, and basically already had orders to pull back into Manhattan. Heath decided, before he got those orders, he decided to go and check it out. Ended up spending a long night of marching basically nothing happened, but Clinton was a little bit slow to finally get over to these forts and to Brooklyn. So not much happened on Long Island, and by the time Clinton caught up to Heath and Spencer, they were already safely across into Manhattan. Where the real action happened was up by New Rochelle, where the Hessians made their landing. It was a bit of a D-Day for them because Putnam was there. He had been building defenses on the heights west of the city, and he was prepared. And Greene wasn't that far from him to the north either. And so when the Hessians arrived, they had a literal uphill battle and a hard fight. And they did it eventually. Should I show a new map showing the battle, or just talk through it?
If you have another map, you can just change the map state. I think I'd erase the markings first. We can erase the markings, all drawn lines. There you go. And if you have a new map state, go ahead and load it in.
See, I'll pick one. Of course, there's a lot of them, but this kind of shows. Oh no, that's towards the end. Hold on, let me get a different one.
So that's sort of the grand finale there that we're looking at.
Well,
I zoom back out. We won't give too much away too soon.
no, it's okay. Let's see what this shows.
So many pieces.
A lot.
All right. So, yeah, this is kind of mid-battle. So the Hessians, one of the things that I tried to simulate is it takes a while to get men off the boats and onto the shore. And so there's a kind of a simulation of all the flatboats there that are showing the movement. But basically the British or the Hessians could only move 2 regiments at a time onto the shore every 30-minute turn. So it's pretty slow. So while they have a lot of forces, it takes a while to get on the shore. And so they don't have numerical superiority to begin with, but they do over time. So the Hessians.
What time of day is the landing?
This was in the morning, early morning. It actually started with a fog.
Okay,
and
so they
you
were
can
able
see,
to approach the shore undetected.
Right, yeah. So Putnam noticed it once they were already starting to land. You can see New Rochelle's on fire because it had been bombarded. And basically the Hessians that day the Hessians had with significant casualties taken the hill, pushed Putnam back to that creek east of East Chester. But it was a hard day's fight. And then they decided to chase Greene up north in some night action, and they chased him all the way up to Mamaroneck that night. While still holding New Rochelle, and they had plans to kind of move around north and flank the Americans. Putnam attacked, also did a night action, attacked the Hessian defenses at New Rochelle. But at this point, and maybe Portal, you want to explain your frame of mind, but the Americans weren't feeling too comfortable. They were getting reports of people on the west of the Hudson, people in Long Island, this giant attack in New Rochelle. So he's kind of feeling outnumbered and surrounded. So you want to share what you were thinking at that point, Portal?
So I saw how many Hessians there were, and I thought, okay, they have a force here, they have a force at Long Island, they have a force in Newark. If all these are the same, we're like hopelessly outnumbered. So I wanted to retreat at that point and just get out of there because I thought there was no winning with all the trouble the Hessians had given us. Luckily, it turned out the Hessians were maybe half the British forces, maybe 40%, but still quite a few of them, and we had taken quite the beating. I mean, we bombarded them and captured quite a few, but I think part of the problem with Kriegsspiel is you see your own losses and don't see the enemy so clearly.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a big part of it. The fog of war is it's huge, as I experienced this morning in my own game. Why not throw them back into the sea? I mean, you see them getting off the boats. Why not immediately attack them? Why? I see what looks like breastworks or fortifications prepared. These little things here.
We had manned the breastworks and fortifications for a long time. The problem with getting closer is they had naval bombardment coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So every time we try to get close, they just blow it all up. And
Mm.
there were quite a few times, I mean, they were very willing to pull the trigger on it and sometimes even bombard their own troops just to
Mm.
prevent us from swooping in.
Wow. Wow. Um. Okay, so you guys fight here. How are you resolving the combats before? Because I think we're getting close to the end of the campaign, maybe. But I see some D6s here. What was your system for combat resolution?
Yeah, I would call it a modification of the SoCal system. So I was doing 30-minute turns because this is quite an expansive map. Each square here is a mile. So I can't get too much into the minutia of it, but basically I'm rolling a d6, and that d6 causes a level of disruptions based on the roll, and then I give it plus or minus based on the situation and defenses, flanking attacks, things like that. But if you roll a 6 and all else is equal, a unit might be routed already or breaking within that half hour. So it can, a lot could happen in half an hour, and so it's kind of hard to simulate all that in a single roll, but I did my best because there's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like it's working really well. The results don't seem too outlandish. They seem very straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens next now? The Americans are pushed behind the Hutchison River and up to I can't pronounce it.
Memoronic.
Memoronic. Oh, it's an A.
Yeah.
Okay.
So half the Hessians had chased Green up here to Memoronic during the night, and he fled way up north, almost to the top of the map.
And the thinking there was, we know these forces are on their own and isolated. Let's go ahead and take them out. That's easy victory. I know our forces are exhausted, but let's take what we can.
Defeat in detail. Yeah.
Right.
And so, but I mean, I think they learned at one point they were even shooting at themselves. So they learned because I gave them basically no visibility to anything with the night fighting. So it was a bit of a mess, hard to control their units. But they sent them running. They didn't capture him, but they sent him running. So half the Hessian force was down here, half was up here. In the morning, they recalled the other half to join them. And during that, this was kind of a bit of luck on the American side. Portal had ordered, or Washington had ordered the retreat. So Putnam, there were a few divisions here defending this side. Putnam was already marching at this side of the creek. And so when they saw, and he was retreating, he's trying to get off the map, and then he and actually Washington were marching together, and they saw this line of march going this way. I can't remember. I think it's Sullivan was down here. He saw the British.
Sullivan and Mercer.
Yeah, so I think it's Sullivan first. He saw the Hessians pulling away. So on his own initiative, he launched attack into their rear. Putnam launched attack on their flank and their line of march, and then there's immediately a lot more divisions ready as reinforcements. So it's kind of someone else came here in the middle and then cut off the two parts, and kind of was able to attack south first and then north. And then finally, hours later, Green made his march and he came back down from the north. And so what ended up happening is some Hessians here were surrounded and caught, and then almost all, I'd say about 3/4 of the Hessians got surrounded and caught here. And so almost the entirety of the Hessian army was captured by the end of the day.
It was very well played by the Americans. Also very unfortunate for us. Very unlucky. There were a couple things that were by chance there. So it was a brutal day for the Hessians and the British.
I think we had a lot of luck with it. I don't know. There was a moment, I think Putnam and I were here, where I got the message from Green that he'd been pushed back here but was holding. And then Putnam also told me he did a night attack against the Hessian defenders here, and he said it was really successful. So they marched their forces north, is what we knew at that point, by putting the two pieces of information together.
Yep. And the reason for going north was also, they had quite a defensive line there at the river, and I didn't want to take them head on. And half the reason of the Hessian force was to pull the army away from Manhattan. And so I was going to go the long way around, like all the way up here, to get around them and draw them away. Never made it near that far, but that was the idea.
In fairness, I think we had, what, 7 commanders? I think 7, 6.
Yeah,
Most of them were here.
You almost had, except for I think 2 divisions, you had all of the American army against what was a third of the British
Right.
force, which is why you're able to do
And
it.
it's still kind of like they got captured, but they distracted you and pulled you away, I think, long enough for Cornwallis to make his move. James can speak to that, but
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was one day, and then basically the following day or two after. So this, I mean, the Hessians were lost. It was a huge, disaster for the British. But what it did do is it drew all the Americans out east, and so by that point, Clinton was here in Brooklyn, and Cornwallis was positioned here and here. And so that night, during a storm, Cornwallis brought his longboats up the river under the cover of darkness in the storm, and he made a major landing here in the middle of Manhattan. And then soon after, Clinton started making landings over here and here, and what little forces were in Manhattan were quickly getting outnumbered. The final main battle, there's kind of 2 of them. They centered around King's Bridge here, and then in the center of Harlem here. And it was a very, very stiff fight for this fort and this bridge, basically for control of Manhattan. Let's erase them all. But in the end, because they had the bridge and the fort, the British were able to hold Manhattan. So they achieved their primary objective, and the Americans achieved their primary objective. They kept their army intact, and compared to historical, that's got a much larger victory than the American army did at that time. But both sides achieved their primary objectives, but not their secondary objectives. But the British retained control in Manhattan, and the American army was able to retreat north to safety.
So who won the campaign then?
So
British,
I call
obviously.
what I called it was a tie in the American favor, because both sides achieved their primary objectives, which weren't directly opposed to each other. But the Americans achieved a major victory with defeating or capturing almost all the entire Hessian forces, which would severely limit the British campaign for the rest of spreading across the colonies.
Do you want to show us the final map state just for the heck of it?
Sure.
Let's have a look at that.
1 second.
While James is doing that, Hotron, anything you would have done different?
Yes, if I would have known that I didn't need to go to Long Island to clear those forts to get naval or support along Manhattan, and also I was kind of trying to keep it exciting for everyone, and so 3-prong attack, nothing's more exciting than that. I would have sent Clinton along with the Hessians. So instead of him going to Long Island, he would have landed at New Rochelle, and they would have been like almost twice the size of army there. And I think that would have changed things significantly. I don't think all the Hessians would have been captured, but who knows?
And it looks like you have them corralled here. I guess these are the prison camps.
Yeah, those are the special prison camps for the Hessians.
Portals, what about you? Anything you would have done differently?
I think the last day I could have done better. We did have plans. We had a whole bunch of troops in East Chester, and then the next morning they navally landed. But we had plans to move out these troops in the morning to defend Manhattan, because at that point we knew the British were coming and they were going to land. We just thought we had more time than we did. Yeah.
So it looks like you made a lot of pieces and components for yourselves. You borrowed, obviously, from some existing stuff, which is no crime. That's actually expected. But I also see it looks like you modified some things. The hit markers look unique. These little explosion things. You added some thickness and put some numbers on them. What did that represent? The number of hits they've taken?
Those are wounds. So anytime they got routed, basically they would take a wound, which represented casualties, either losses or injuries, and so they would have less firepower in any future engagements.
Nice, nice. Interesting to see how you did that. And then what are these here? Says damage on it. Okay, so that's for artillery, maybe, or no? I see
Yeah, those
those
got
are.
spiked, so they're the highest wounds that can be.
Mm, man. So James, anything that you would have done differently as an umpire?
Um, I wasn't ready for that question. So one of the things I did is I arbitrarily drew where the British could land. And I just kind of eyeballed spots that looked like they could be landing areas. In hindsight, I didn't give enough, and it restricted the British in a lot of ways,
This
more
is
than
true.
historical, that they could only land in certain spots, and that was to the benefit of the Americans. For example, on the northeast, they could only land at New Rochelle and Mamaroneck, which made it easier for the Americans to pick a spot to defend. In reality, the Americans couldn't have predicted it that easily, and I wish I'd made it more options just to be more realistic and give
It,
the British a leg up.
yeah, there were like 15 landing spots or so, I want to say, and like 12 or 11 of them were inaccessible from forts, and then we got here and they had built new forts to cover the new ones, and so there was like 1 or 2 spots left. It was uh, Amboy and New Rochelle. That was it, and Mamaroneck.
Yeah,
So yeah, it was. I can agree with that.
good. James, anything that you learned? What did you learn from this experience?
Um, One of the things that I tried to do, because it was such an expansive map, I wanted to keep it interesting for everyone all the time. And to do that, I messed with the timelines. So some people were hours ahead of each other. Some of them were half a day or a day ahead, which for the most part worked out. But every now and then it would make things very messy, especially with communication between each other. And with other campaigns or games that I've done, I've basically stopped trying to do that because it's too hard. Just keep everyone on the same timeline, even if they're sitting there doing nothing. It's just easier as an umpire. Um, let's see, what else did I learn? I mean, I'm constantly refining my rule system. The 30-minute time is a little bit long in my opinion. I I'm getting more comfortable with the 15-minute time turn, and I like that one a lot. And I think most games I do will be at that time range because for me, that's about the right level of detail of what I want to do.
Hmm.
30 minutes was a little bit too abstract and broad. A lot can happen in 30 minutes that it's kind of hard to simulate and describe. Um, so, yeah, those are some things.
Yeah, it's hard to find that balance. Again, scale I think has a lot to do with it. If you're doing what we call operational scale, which this is kind of operational scale, a turn might be a whole day, but then you're getting tactical at the same time, in which case, yeah, those 30 to 15 minute turns seems to work. I think you scaled it perfectly, frankly. Um, I really like what I've seen you do here. I like that you chose an absolutely gorgeous map. I like that you put together interesting problems for both scenarios. I like that you created your own stuff, that you developed your own rule system. Took something that worked previously and adapted it to your use. It's really pretty cool. Did you have anybody assist you at the umpire table, or did you just do it all yourself?
I did it all myself. I know a lot of umpires like assistants. For me, it's hard to coordinate, so I did it all my own.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's amazing, and that's a style thing. Obviously, more assistance, typically the faster things can run, but also if you don't coordinate, you can get all kinds of issues and troubles. So sometimes it's just not worth it either.
Yep.
Um, and you know what? In the realm of hobbies, this is a pretty good one. So it doesn't cost too much. It's compelling. It's educational. You'll learn a lot. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about other people. You learn a little bit about psychology and negotiation and military stuff and history. It's just absolutely fantastic. Any final thoughts or words, Houghton? Anything you want to say before we end up here?
No, I think I've about said it all. Overall, it was an enjoyable game, and I'm happy everyone could leave a winner.
Fantastic. How about you, Portals?
Yeah, it was really fun. One of my favorite parts of the battle was all the confusion about the truce. Um,
Oh yeah,
that
I,
was,
st I still don't know everything about that.
I think, what happened is when the Hessians surrendered um, to Putnam, and we thought he was speaking for the whole British team, so we stopped shooting, and then
Oh my.
got really mad when the British started attacking us again. Um, and
Oh, you're talking about the one British division that was there with the Hessians?
yeah,
Uh,
and
yeah, yeah,
like we
okay.
were real mad. I know Putnam or Green was ready to just start shooting British.
Commit some war crimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
that made us really, really mad.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
cool touch.
Um, James, any last thoughts or comments from you?
I mean, overall, it was a really fun experience for me. It was fun to see the different strategies that everyone did, and almost everyone did a great job getting into character. The Kriegsspiel Society we have is a lot of fun, and people did a really good job role playing, their role,
Almost
and
too good in
almost
some cases.
too good. I know a Portal had to deal with some insubordination and people maybe role playing a little bit too heavily, but no, it was really fun for me to watch. I enjoy umpiring because you get the big picture and just to see how people play is a blast. So I appreciate everyone that participated in this one.
Yeah, I think we had a Hessian commander who turned in our three-prong attack plans to General Washington, so that was
Oh wow.
I'm not sure if that was
And
role-playing or if
promise
he
for
was actually
farmland
angry.
and I think he's
Yeah,
angry, but and promise for farmland in Pennsylvania, I think it was.
I think
yeah,
he was mad because you had sent him down to save the other Hessians,
yeah,
and you were like resting or something. He said you were like sleeping, too
yeah.
busy resting to help the other Hessians out.
Mm.
I don't think he realized we were fighting for our lives.
Well,
Anyways, it was good times.
wonderful. All right, I wanna thank everyone for being here. Obviously, James for running the game, doing the interview. Hotron Portals, I want to thank you. I want to acknowledge Lake, who is in the audience watching. Good to see you here, Lake.
Oh,
Brett and Justin were present on the YouTube as well as Sean, and had some comments that you guys can check out on the YouTube later. But I just want to thank everyone for being here and being part of this experience. It seems like it was a really rich and insightful experience, and I'm very excited that you're already planning more. And all I can say is pace yourself. Don't be afraid to call for help or recruit some assistance, and keep up the great work, James. Good job.
Thank you,
also,
Marshall.
if I can, Lake did a great job in this battle. He was just a great, great aide. Um, and I really liked the role play coming. That was really fun. If any of you get a
Absolutely.
chance to read through the channels, they're well worth reading.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Lake himself is one of our master umpires, so it's great to have him involved in any capacity. All right, everybody, thank you much. I'm going to wrap up the live stream. Everybody who's watching this, just be advised there will not be a regular episode of Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. This will suffice for that coverage tomorrow. I'm going to be gone. However, we will be back the Sunday following and probably even next Saturday with another live game just like we had today. And I want to thank everyone, and we will see you on our next adventure. Bye for now.